Well,
that's right. Winners want the ball.
Winners want the ball, man.
Right. Winners do want the ball.
Coffee's for closers. Hey everybody, and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore. I'm one of your hosts, like I am every week, because I love doing this podcast. To my right is the good doctor, Scott Melson. Hello, sir.
What's up, man?
How are you?
You know I'm well. It's dry today.
It's not raining today.
It's not raining. It's hotter than I would prefer. But it's not raining.
Yesterday,
so that's good.
I was on a conference call with a lady in Seattle. This is related to Civic Saturday, which we'll talk about later, but I was coordinating with our national partners, and she was like, what exactly is going on with your weather in Oklahoma? I was like, well, I just opened the National Weather Service website, and it appears that there's a giant pinwheel of rain just hovering over the state. And so I was like, I'll send you the link. And so we're talking, and a minute later, she's like, I got your email. Oh, you're right. It's just sitting there. I was like, yeah. All day. Just raining all day.
At 3 inches an hour, no less.
Yeah, lots of areas.
So do you know, it was the thing was bad for me. It actually, at my house, like it rained a lot, but it wasn't as bad as it was west of the metro and kind of northwest of the metro. But the thing that was frustrating for me is like when the storms rolled in about 3 o'clock yesterday morning, when it like started with the thunder and lightning, my power kept going in and out.
Yes.
And the thing that's infuriating about that is because I am a pretentious millennial, and so I have my lights are on Alexa, through Hue.
Yeah.
And so when the power goes out, they come on. Yes. And you can't turn them off until your network resets.
I had the exact same problem.
And so the lights come on and they stay on for 10 minutes and they go out, and then 10 minutes later it happens again.
Yeah.
It's absolutely infuriating.
It woke up my dog at 3 a.m. and I was like, why are all the lights on?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I learned something interesting, and to quote friends, kind of playing it fast and loose with the word interesting here, but I learned yesterday why that happens. Do you know why your power goes out and then immediately comes back on?
I assume there's different reasons, so no.
Apparently the most common reason is that lightning strikes one of the transmission lines, one of the high lines.
Right.
And when it strikes a transmission line, because the insulators are there capping it on either end,
right.
It will arc to the ground. And when it arcs to the ground, it effectively creates a short circuit.
Yeah, closes the circuit. Yeah.
It's shorted to ground, and when that happens, it trips a breaker. But unlike the breakers that are in your house, that breaker can reset itself.
Right.
It looks to see if the short is still there.
Right.
And so that's why they come out, but then they will immediately come back on.
Yeah.
But if that happens too many times, too close together, back to back to back to back, it'll shut off and trip, and then the power company has to reset it and turn your power back on. But that's why your lights can flicker, is because that arc goes, the breaker trips, and then it sets itself back.
You learn something new on this podcast every week.
It's true.
This week it's electronics.
I learned that at 3:30 yesterday morning, because I was like, WTF, why does this happen like this?
I'm going to Google that right now. Well, anyway, thank you for that, Scott. That's very helpful.
You're welcome.
To Scott's right, over at the news desk, we have Brian Ted Jones.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here, sir.
Yeah.
Brian came by to drop something off, and we roped him into being on the podcast after a lengthy discussion of the criminal justice system.
That's right. Yeah,
which I think will continue.
Yeah.
Yes. We're I'm going to pitch on the spot here. We are planning on having a whole episode on criminal justice reform later this summer, and based on the hour that we just talked, would you want to come back?
Absolutely.
Brian, you're a criminal justice or criminal defense attorney.
I do have
among other talents,
some folks that I am representing currently. I'm largely a medical marijuana attorney these days, but I've been a criminal defense attorney for most of the last decade.
Is it odd that used to be a criminal defense situation and now it's not?
It's disorienting for me to say, to speak for myself. Yeah, I mean, it's there's a bit of a shift that I've had to work through in my own head to go from representing people who are accused of doing something criminally to representing people that I'm helping to do the exact same thing legally. Yeah.
It's a funny world we live in.
That's interesting. Funny world.
That's really
I still think 5 years ago we would have never predicted this would be the state of affairs in Oklahoma.
Really?
Most people. I don't know. I think 5 years ago I didn't think about it.
I think we might have. I think a lot of people wouldn't have, but I think we might have.
Right. But I mean, for a state that is often bemoaned as being behind the times. The fact that we passed liquor modernization laws, medical marijuana, criminal justice reform, like all these things, like in the same 2-year period, is pretty phenomenal.
I mean, it is, but it also, I think, speaks to what you talk about a lot, is that we, as Oklahomans generally, we are not huge fans of just like government in general. Like Oklahoma, it's very red, obviously, but I think Oklahoma is actually more libertarian than it is like straight, like kind of dyed-in-the-wool conservative Republican.
Right.
Or I shouldn't say more. It's that I think there's a wider streak of that here than maybe in some other places.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, and this is just a preview for, I guess, our listeners, but as you know, Scott, because we've talked about this, one of the big issues for me right now is about redistricting, right? So about gerrymandering and about independent redistricting. And so that's another series we're going to do this summer. We're going to have Keith Gaddy from OU, who's a bit of an expert on this, and some other folks to talk about it. And I really, if you're listening to this podcast and you care about redistricting as well, I really want to hear about it. I really want to do some like focus groups, or just I may drive around the state and talk to people and start like, I don't think people understand how our district lines are drawn. Like, I think everyone just kind of assumes they're there. They don't know that we redo it every 10 years. And we had an episode about this a few months ago with our intern. And I tweeted about this and she retweeted me. So shout out to Megan if you're still listening. But I really, it's just, I've downloaded probably 10 podcasts about gerrymandering this week and really binged on that. And so I'm hot to trot on this issue that it's not a real democracy if you're drawing the lines unfairly.
So intentionally or not, you've actually you've just gone straight into the news roundup.
So, let me
we're already halfway there.
Let me hit the button and we can get into it.
All right. So our first piece this up is from KGOU. So this is a piece called Redistricting Gurus Hard Drives Could Mean Legal Political Woes for the GOP, the Grand Old Party, also known as Republicans. So
you're a grand old party. You're a high-flying party.
This is an article talking about a man named Thomas Hofeller. So Thomas Hofeller was a Republican strategist and redistricting kind of gerrymandering guru who recently passed away. And upon his passage, his daughter, when she was going through his things, found a sack, literally a sack full of a bunch of hard drives and thumb drives. Oops. And she found 100,000 files on this hard drive, which have proved very, very interesting. So essentially what this Thomas Hofeller was very involved in the kind of nationwide redistricting effort that the Republican Party undertook after the 2010 census, that has and I'm trying to be as impartial here as I can, but the Republican Party undertook an effort to redraw district lines across the country in ways that were as advantageous to them as possible. Many of those efforts have been challenged in court. Some of those cases have gone all the way to the Supreme Court.
They're going to be ruling
and
soon.
There are some more cases. Well, in fact, so one of the reasons this is so newsworthy is because there's a case that has already been argued before the court this term. But since we got an attorney here, he can tell me what this is called. Apparently, there's a rule where you've argued the case already, but then to quote the dude from The Big Lebowski, new shit comes to light. And when there's new evidence that comes out, you can tell the court and be like, hey, hello. So we already talked about this, but there is some information you don't have.
Yeah.
You know, what's that called?
Sounds like a petition for rehearing.
Something like that. It's very, very, very official sounding. And there's people that are writing.
Writ of do-over.
Yeah, there's
some mulligan.
There's briefs are getting filed and things are being examined. But that's one of the reasons this is so newsworthy, is because this is the question of whether or not partisan gerrymandering is permitted under the Constitution, and the extent to which it is or is not is a question that the court has been wrestling with for years and years now, but a lot recently. So the article is really interesting. Check it out. I mean, I think my favorite quote from Mr. Hofeller in the article is this is quoting him in 2010 at the National Conference of State Legislatures. He says, quote, "Redistricting is like an election in reverse. It's a great event. Usually the voters get to pick the politicians. In redistricting, the politicians get to pick the voters."
That is literally, I said that the other day in a meeting. I was like, it's not fair. Like, they should not get to pick their voters. We pick them.
Yeah, well, Mr. Huffler, may he rest in peace, would disagree with you.
No,
So-
I think he agrees. Well,
no. He says
we
disagrees.
disagree. He thinks it's the correct
Yeah,
thing
he
to do.
thinks it's fantastic.
Okay, yeah. So on the premise
No,
that
I
it's
think
right or wrong,
you both agree that is in fact what happens.
Yes.
You're like, this is not how it should work, and he says, no, that is precisely how it should work.
Right.
So go to kgou.com. You will be able to find this there. We'll put it up on the blog. And as Andy said, look to hear way, way more from us and the show about redistricting and what it means, how it's affected Oklahoma in the coming months. We're gonna talk a lot about it.
I'm serious about doing some kind of statewide tour, like some kind of listening group tour,
Agree.
like StoryCorps,
Yes.
but about redistricting.
Hard yes.
Ooh, I need an Airstream.
All right, shall we continue?
Yes.
That was not going to be the lead story, but Andy gets so excited about redistricting that we went with it. But next up from non-doc, some sad news this week, and for which and news that we don't really have a great explanation for. So Senator Jonathan Nichols, who is a former Republican state senator, was working in Governor Stitt's office, has served Oklahoma government in a variety of capacities, passed away yesterday. Was it yesterday or Wednesday? He was found
Wednesday.
He was found dead at his home of a gunshot wound. There's an investigation ongoing. We don't know what has happened. Non-doc has the piece and a really nice profile of Senator Nichols with a lot of bipartisan accolades for how great he was to work with and how he served the state. So definitely take the time to check that out. It's sad, but it's a nice tribute of someone who really did a lot of work for the state.
Yeah. It's I think it's one of those stories that it was certainly surprising, unexpected. It wasn't like he was ill, or
Yeah, he was shot.
yeah.
And we don't know by whom or why.
Right.
So
Yeah, a lot of unanswered questions, and so certainly our thoughts and prayers with his family.
indeed. Up next, a piece from the Oklahoman, and this is one of those that I just kind of shake my head a little. So, auditors find overpayments in Okmulgee County. So, big audit was done and has found that multiple countywide officials in Okmulgee County, including county commissioner, sheriff, treasurer, county clerk, court clerk, and county assessor, were overpaid from 2014 to now. And they were overpaid, like their salaries were too big. And they quote Vanna Lumpkins, who's the county treasurer in Okmulgee. She says, "I'm shocked, and I'm glad I decided to keep my 2011 Nissan." I think that was a good year for the Nissan.
Nissan's a good car.
Nissan's a great car. But I guess my question, I get paid twice a month, and I know exactly how much it's supposed to be. And if there's ever a time that number is different than what I'm expecting, I look at my pay stub and I'm like, what is different this year or this month or this week than the last 27 paychecks I've received? So I'm just curious. You're shocked. Why are you?
Well,
why are you?
I think it was before she was in office.
No, it's just she's one of the ones.
Yeah, but
one
of
the elected officials found to have received excessive payments.
Right. But I think it's been their whole
her whole career. So her paycheck's always been the same.
Right.
Yeah, fair enough.
And they said that they think it was just a misinterpretation by a previous county assessor on how to fill out a form. I guess the county, Brian looks skeptical. I guess the county employee minimum salary schedule is some kind of formula-based situation, which I have to see it to understand. There's probably a reason, but to me it seems weird that there's a formula. Why not just have a number on a piece of paper that's you get paid $42,000? That's, in my mind, how it should work.
Because it's government.
As we know from Facebook, sometimes algorithms don't work in our favor.
What?
And when you make them really complicated at very low levels of government, it seems unnecessary. Anyway, I'm glad they're going to fix the glitch.
Indeed. Do they have to pay it back? Does it say?
It didn't say.
I would think they have to pay back, right?
That's not their fault.
Yeah, right.
But if it's not, if you got a paycheck, you get a paycheck. Let's say someone came in and said, Scott, man, listen, we've been paying you and everybody else the wrong amount forever. We're going to need you to give this money back.
That is absolutely what my place of work would do.
Okay, but how would you feel about it?
I mean, I wouldn't be excited about it. And you're shaking your head. They're like not allowed to do that. Is that the deal?
Well, I'm just shaking my head because I would be really upset, and I would say no.
Be like, listen, I've been making this amount the whole time.
No, true. I wouldn't want to, but I can just tell you that that's what they would do.
Also, there's a chance, and again, I don't know. I don't live or work in Okmulgee County, so I don't know. But in my place of employment, when you get hired, there's like a offer letter that states the amount in there, or there's like a form you got to fill. Like it's on paper about how much this person's going to get paid.
Same.
I would assume, right or wrong, that Okmulgee County might have similar pieces of paper. So people could have been hired and paid the wrong amount the whole time, but it's not their fault, and it was on paper somewhere, and they're like, but you paid me. Now, if it's like,
Right, but if the paper says
one number and they got paid something else,
right?
That's
now,
different.
if the paper says the wrong number and then they've been getting paid the wrong number, I mean that's tough noogies, right? Like, I'm sorry that you agreed to pay me too much,
right?
But if it is we agreed to pay you X and we have instead been paying you Y and we just realized it, like, sorry, you got to give us the difference back, like.
Or maybe,
I'd be pissed, but that's what they would do.
Or maybe they just issue an edict that, well, everyone got a raise, and we'll just leave it at this, and you don't get a raise for the next 3 years. Or if you're in state government, the next 12 years.
Or ever.
Or ever, right. We might take your money.
All right. All right. So
if any of our listeners are in Okmulgee County and happen to work for the county or any county for that matter, we should ask Carrie Bloomert.
Yeah. She'd come on.
She'd tell us about how this works if she's figured it out in Oklahoma County. I'm sure every county now is like, oh shit, let's check our check our numbers, because it happened in Grady County first.
Yeah,
that's how State Auditor Cindy Bird knew to look for it.
It's not an uncommon thing.
Yeah,
that's what it seems.
I'm telling you, stuff at the county level. There's a little
fishy,
a lot of stuff going on there.
A little fishy.
Most powerful level of government, according to some people, in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think it could be true.
Not all states call them counties, though, right?
Louisiana and Alaska, I believe, call them parishes.
Ooh.
I know Louisiana. I'm not sure. I think Alaska maybe.
That's surprising. I would not imagine parishes in Alaska.
Yeah, I may be totally wrong. It may just be Louisiana.
I think they're called something weird in Minnesota too.
There was counties. I lived there.
Is it counties?
I lived in Washington County.
All right.
All right. What's our last story there?
Last story. So this is a huge piece of news. You guys may have heard about this already. So big announcement this week that Devon and Chesapeake and Continental. Sandridge have all announced that after the legislature raised the gross production tax from 2% to 5% last year, that they're packing up, they're leaving, layoffs are happening, and they are moving out of Oklahoma.
You're full of lies.
That's not it.
That's not it.
That's not what happened.
No, they're still drilling oil here because the oil is here.
Oh wait. Oh no. Here's what it was. It's that Oklahoma Policy Institute, they put out their 2020 budget highlights and said that the vast majority of new revenue that's in the budget this year is from the increased gross production tax that the legislature passed last year.
Well, that's not just from the OK Policy budget highlights. That's actually from the budget.
Yeah, it's a fact.
Those are the actual numbers.
Yes.
However, we have before us the policy highlights because that's where you read it first.
I just think it's hilarious because I literally was going through my Twitter feed this morning and OK Policy, like they tweeted that out that like these revenues are due in large part to the legislature's quote willingness to increase gross production tax last year. And I mean, I went through and it was like retweet after retweet after retweet after retweet of like, oh wait, so are they leaving? Did they lay everybody off? Are they quitting? Are they moving? Headquarters are going to Houston? What's happening? No, that's not happening. They're paying more in taxes and they're fine.
Yeah.
The economy's killing it. They're doing great.
Right. For right now. However, I will say that in the OK Policy fiscal year 19 or fiscal year 20 budget highlights, there is a graph. We have a paper copy here.
I love graphs.
You can hear.
Good charts change the world.
It's figure 6, state savings balances from fiscal year 2001 to 2020 in millions of dollars. And you can easily see here, if you're watching this on our stream, the video, you can see a very obvious boom and bust cycle right there.
Indeed.
This is about how much money goes in. This is really what goes into the rainy day fund, right? So this is how much goes. Yeah, the revenue stabilization fund, and then there's rainy day fund. But basically, it's like from we're doing okay, and then in 2004 nothing went in because we had to use it all, and then or the balance there's nothing in there, we used it all. Then we put some in like 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, and 10. We maxed out, put as much as we could, and then boom, 2011, we put nothing in there, and we drained it all. Really, between 9 and 10, we didn't add any, but we didn't take any out either. It was just kind of a flat year. and then we had to drain it all, and then here we are. And so now this year we've got a ton of money that we saved, some of which because the legislature decided to put some of it into a third, yet a third fund.
Yeah, so we're at like just under we're just a hair over $1 billion in the rainy day fund. Governor has a goal of having it to $2 billion by the end of his first term.
So I had this conversation with OK Policy's budget analyst Paul Shin yesterday, that and with David Blatt, that my understanding, or their understanding, is that the rainy day fund, the amount that, or no, I think the balance that it can be, right, is
it's capped constitutionally.
Is capped, but it's capped at a certain percentage of the previous year's appropriated or previous year's revenue.
Yeah.
So there's a scenario that hasn't happened yet. There's a scenario where we exceed the cap, and then, but we can't. How did it work out? Like that that we would have, it would be, let's say, $2 billion this year, but then because revenue was down, but the next year the cap is smaller than what's actually in there.
Right. Yes. I don't think that they're required to like spend it down in that circumstance, but I could be wrong.
Well, their guess was they would just roll over to the special cash fund.
Oh,
they would just move it over, and then they would still appropriate it.
Sure.
But it just, to me, again, highlighted that all of our budget, many of our state budget approaches are reactive in nature, and they are reactive in the worst ways. Like that they often are misguided and aren't really leading us to a sound fiscal future as a state.
Agree. Did you have any other nuggets from the 2020 budget highlights?
I'm sure I do. I mean, mostly it's pretty much just smoke them if you got them. But I think if you will look at the OK Policy budget thing, they really do have a appropriations breakdown by agency from 2009 to 2020. So that's 10 years, and it shows basically like what happens for each agency year to year, which I think is helpful just in understanding okay, where have we been? And it's a several page long table.
Trends are your friend.
Trends are your friends. I like that.
And charts change the world.
That's not as warm and fuzzy as trends are your friends.
Right.
I want to get a t-shirt with that on there. I think the other thing that I appreciate is that
Churchman Hearts.
Ooh.
There it is.
Right.
There it is.
Right. Well
Front
done,
and
Dave.
back right there. I like it.
The other thing that I appreciate is that OK Policy puts out like appropriations numbers since their inception, pretty much, or the last 10 or 11 years worth. So they go back to fiscal year 09, and in some cases they have gone back, like in graphing the appropriations for the last 20 years, adjusted for inflation, which is important. You will notice, listeners, that lesser think tanks will put out graphs that just report numbers that have not been adjusted for inflation. Well, that bothers me because they'll be like, well, there's more people in school this year than ever before. I'm like, well, there's more people on Earth than ever before.
Yeah.
Of course that happened.
And they do that because it's very misleading. And they know it's misleading, right? And it's also
they know, but the public doesn't always know, and that's
Right.
what I'm concerned about is protecting the public.
right. And it's frustrating too because they're like literally the only people that do that.
Yeah, right. Here of the like 3 groups that ever put out these numbers.
Yes.
So I will highlight.
We're talking about we're talking about them who must not be named is the think tank in question.
I'll say OCPA.
Yeah.
That's who it is. And I will take them to task. They don't always do a good job. I don't think they listen, but they don't do a good job with numbers sometimes.
Wait, you don't think they subscribe to the show?
I don't think so.
I think you're right.
Of our 7 or 8 listeners, they are not one. But just as a tidbit of information, fun fact, in fiscal year 2000, which would have been the year that I moved to Oklahoma, state appropriations were $9.2 billion, right? That was 20 years ago, right? So fast forward 20 years, which is a generation, appropriations for next year will be just under $8 billion.
7.999 in fact.
Yes. And so we are appropriating less money to government now than we did 20 years ago.
In absolute terms.
Right.
No, that's adjusted for.
Oh, that is
yeah.
just for okay.
Yeah. No, in absolute terms, it's probably more now than it was then. But again, it's 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, like a humping bottle of soda wasn't $3. Have you bought soda lately?
I
almost never do. I was at a gas station, and for a 20-ounce bottle, it was like $1.79.
Are you serious?
I guarantee that soda does not cost more money to produce today than it did. This is not even including tariffs. Like I just think that someone is racketeering on. There's a soda tax, which is if that's the case,
I
that's fine. But
I remember when all the vending machines changed from 12-ounce cans to 20-ounce bottles,
Right.
and it went from 50 cents for a can, and
Yes.
all the vending machines were $1, and I thought it was out frigging outrageous.
Yes.
I was like, that is a 100% price increase for like an 80% increase in volume of soda, and that's ridiculous.
when I worked at Subway as a sandwich artist, it was in a gas station. You could buy a 2-liter bottle of soda for 99 cents. All of them.
You go to Crest, you still can.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, well that's highway robbery then. If you can buy a 2-liter bottle for 99 cents, but a 20-ounce bottle costs almost $2. And if you go to a restaurant, it's darn near $3 for a soda.
Yeah, that's why I drink beer.
That's exactly why I drink beer. All right.
All right,
A quick
for our
update.
news roundup, or are you what did you get here?
No, I have an update here.
Oh, I see a map of Alaska on your screen.
Indeed. So Alaska is one of only 2 states that does not have counties. Louisiana has parishes. Alaska has boroughs. It also has one very large unorganized borough administered directly by the state that is
Denali?
broken into several census areas. So
That's
if you
interesting.
Google it. Maybe I'll try to remember it. I'll put this on the blog as well.
That's almost as interesting as my analysis of or explanation of why electricity outages happen.
Well, we've learned so much today in this podcast already.
Never say we don't teach you things, dear listeners. Never say that you don't come away smarter than when you tuned in.
Boroughs, huh?
Boroughs, much like New York City, but different because they're called like the North Slope and the Northwest Arctic and Nome, Dillingham, Valdez, Cordova.
Are you going to read
You know-
all of them?
No.
How many boroughs are there in Alaska?
It looks like roughly 15 or so.
Okay.
Juneau, Anchorage, some of those. Some of them, Kodiak Island. A lot
I
of.
really want to go to Alaska.
I would not have guessed there was a borough called Dillingham in Alaska, right? It seems like the wrong. If it was in Delaware, sure, makes sense. Alaska, not so much. Prince of
we-
Wales, Outer Ketchikan.
That's what it's called?
Yeah,
Prince of Wales, Outer Ketchikan?
yeah.
I had a TA
It's also a Ketchikan Gateway.
I had a TA in
Borough.
college from Ketchikan.
Really?
Yeah.
It sounds fun.
She
All right,
taught my government class.
Nice. Let's take a very quick break, and then we'll come back and actually talk about politics, namely Justin Brown being the director of DHS. We'll be right back. Brian, I saw you bobbing your head during that interlude. Thank you very much.
Yeah, music, right?
Right. Speaks to the soul, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, this music is provided by the Sugar Free All Stars, in case people have not listened to our outro and we talk about that. But they're a good band. Good couple of dudes.
Yep.
All right. So this week it was announced perhaps the most hotly anticipated appointment by the governor so far was for the director of the Department of Human Services here, formerly held by Ed Lake. Ed was hired by a committee. This is back when DHS was going through their whole lawsuit, DOJ intervention, Pinnacle Plan thing. And he was like, it was like a nationwide search.
Yeah.
And they brought this guy in because he ran basically DHS in Tennessee.
Yeah.
And so he came in, he's been here for a decade-ish, I think 7 or 8 years.
8 years. So he came in 2011. He was a 40-year veteran of child welfare services in Tennessee.
I venture to say an expert in this kind of thing.
Yes.
40 years is a long time to do anything.
Yes.
I haven't been alive that long. And so
And-
he did that, came here, really implemented the Pinnacle Plan. But true to Governor Stitt's kind of pledge or desire, at least, he has the option to reappoint existing agency heads or to appoint someone new.
Well, he does now.
He does now.
He didn't.
Well, was DHS one of them they gave to him, or was that already there?
As one of the ones that they gave to him, I think, right? Because Commissioner Lake was appointed, like he was appointed by Fallon, but it was it was a special circumstance because the previous was like let go because of all the problems with DHS.
Because children died.
Yeah, so it was, anyway, so, and Commissioner Lake, I don't know him personally, and certainly I would not say that DHS is an agency without ways in which they could improve. But I think that the general consensus, both from within the agency and people who work with them, would be that he has done a good job. Like he's led the agency well.
I mean, given the circumstances and the difficulty of that agency, right? It's the largest agency. It's like 7,000 or 8,000 employees, and it's not like they're doing happy-go-lucky work.
Right. So I'm assuming that in this case he appointed Justin Brown as kind of like a transition, and that Mr. Brown is also someone with extensive experience and expertise in child welfare and public service.
I can sense your snark, and I have anticipated this.
It's not. It's not.
Well, I'll say a tiny bit yes, but mostly no.
What does he do?
Well, he has run some companies that owned like nursing homes and like assisted living centers, which is under the purview of DHS.
Oh, so he's a business guy.
He's a businessman. Yes.
Oh, so he'll be better.
I don't know about that, but
you can laugh. It's fine.
I think what I'm curious.
I can also not laugh though, right?
You can also not. I am so like I have been like steaming and fuming. I am so pissed off about this. It's like
what aggravates you about
it's
it?
Maybe I like
let it out, Scott.
You know, like here's this. There are several things. So, like, one, the governor has the power now to appoint agency heads or many agency heads, and DHS is certainly one of them. So, there's no question that this is well within his purview to do, and he doesn't have to reason to let he doesn't have to have a reason to let Commissioner Lake go. That's the first thing. But you are taking someone with literally decades of experiences in this particular area of public policy, and you're saying, okay, a better person to take the agency in a better direction is a guy who has literally no experience in this area at all. Like, the only experience that he has is that he is the CEO of a company that's an investment capital firm and like an investment entity that owns some nursing homes. They own 7 nursing homes in Oklahoma and Texas. And like, he serves on the board of the Children's Hospital Foundation. He's on the board of a couple other organizations here in the state that kind of work in this arena. But like, being on the board of an organization that works in this area is not the same as the day-to-day work of like running policy. So the first thing is like, I am concerned that he doesn't like that. He doesn't know how to do this. That's the first question, or the first concern I have. The second concern is like the idea that because he has literally zero experience, he doesn't know what he doesn't know, right? Like, it's not like he's being promoted. Like, it's not like he's a super junior level employee that's being promoted to the top because of his exceptional leadership qualities. Like, he's being brought in completely from the outside. But the third thing that just really like is it Homer Simpson? Is what really grinds my gears, right? Like, is that a Homer Simpson quote?
I don't know.
Or maybe the King of the Hill. I don't know. It's one of those. It is a continued like diminution of public service, right? It is this tacit or even open
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
profession that like public service is not a skill, right? That because someone has been successful in the business world, they are inherently qualified to come in and run this massive government agency that employs 6,000 people, that has a budget of $2 billion. Oh, and by the way, is responsible for ensuring the welfare, safety, and development of some of our most vulnerable children. Like, we're entrusting that to a person who, and I don't know Justin Brown, like, he may be great. Like, people have great things to say about him. He's been very successful in his professional life. And in a year, I may be like, that's the best freaking decision that the governor's ever made. But right now, I have serious questions. Like, you want to replace someone who has been doing a very good job. The Pinnacle Plan, and I'm not going to get into all the details of the Pinnacle Plan, but if you're listening to this and you know about the Pinnacle Plan, you know what I mean when I say the co-neutrals. So the co-neutrals, who are the court-appointed people who are in charge with making sure that Oklahoma is adhering to the Pinnacle Plan, which we were court-ordered to do based on this lawsuit in 2010-2011. The co-neutrals, who are not easy to please, have said that by all accounts, DHS in Oklahoma is moving in the right direction in literally every single way. Mm-hmm. And that has happened under Commissioner Lake. And so we're going to fire him for a venture capitalist because he's a business guy. And because he's forward thinking. Like,
I'll let you take a breath.
That just... Sorry.
For the sake of a counterpoint, here's my thoughts as I've thought about this issue this week. One, so Commissioner Lake was in Tennessee for 40 years. He's been here for 8. There's a chance that he is nearing retirement at some point, and he may not have wanted to stay on, right? He may have been like, you know what, now's a good chance to leave. We don't know. I haven't talked to him. That's one thought. Secondly, as I look at my job, right? So I oversee 26 people, social workers, therapists, nurses, front desk staff, educators, healthcare professionals. I'm a therapist, but I'm not a doctor, but I still oversee some of those things, right? And perhaps those are more closely related than other things, right? Like I'm not overseeing marine biologists, right? And I'm not necessarily like feeding in or agreeing with the idea that we should run government like a business. I think anyone who knows me knows that I have some reservations about that premise. However, I think at the agency level in particular, right? Because DHS does a lot of stuff. They do child welfare. They do senior citizens. They also do a lot of, I feel like I'm going to say shit ton a lot in this episode, but like they've got a lot of employees who do a lot of different things, many of whom are just like paper pushers, right? And like many of whom do things that aren't directly related to the person-centered healthcare work thing that we think about, right? A lot of disability, mission. Yeah, like the mission stuff. And I think it in times can be advantageous to like have a doctor running a hospital, but often at a hospital you have like a chief medical officer, also a chief executive officer, a chief finance officer, and those people have different skill sets. So in our medical program, I am effectively the chief operating officer, like where I run the operations of our program. My boss is our CFO, not really, but that's kind of how she operates. She runs the money and the grants, and then our medical director runs the medical things. And we work together like that. In some ways, I think that, a state agency would probably benefit from a similar oligarchical structure there. Like there's like a multifaceted head, and I get they have to have someone that's like the main one, right? And so
there's a constitutional point, I think, here, and this kind of goes back to Governor Stitt's request that he be given hiring and firing authority over these large agency directors. That really gets into a fundamental question of how the government operates. Is this going to be a government like it was set up under the progressive movement, where boards and commissions are the accountable parties, or is this going to be a government like lots of other governments in the United States,
right,
where it's basically the executive who appoints and hires and fires? And I think that there's something fundamental about this change that in Oklahoma we haven't quite grappled with. I think that when you have agencies being staffed by those decisions getting made by boards and commissions, the idea, I believe, the progressive movement idea was to have people who were not political, not cronies or people who were dependent on some political benefactor, but that you also get more expertise. There's a problem with that because nobody understands how the boards and commissions work, right? And so anytime the public doesn't understand something, I think they feel alienated from it. They feel like there is no accountability, even when there might be some. They're more comfortable with this kind of constitutional government
because it's simpler.
It's simpler. It makes sense. It fits what they're familiar with, at the national level. I think one of the things this underlines is just how strange the Oklahoma constitutional system is. Right.
I do think it's funny that I think to go back to what Scott said earlier about our kind of populist undertones here, that I think many voters would say two things that are in many ways diametrically opposed, but somehow we hold them both in our brain, right? That we don't want unelected bureaucrats running stuff, which are boards and commissions. We also don't want the executive to have power to appoint. And I was like, well, those are the only two options, really, like, unless you just like draw lots, right? And that's Hunger Games. So we don't want that either. And so like the three options are unelected bureaucrats, appointed political cronies, or Hunger Games lottery system.
And we've tried the first two.
Right. That's all we have left. Then
Yeah.
let's just. I volunteer as tribute.
I mean, I think you both are. I make great points. I think Brian, what you're saying about how like what a fundamental change this is in Oklahoma is 100% true. I think that while I certainly in theory, I kind of like the idea of like the boards and commissions, but I also can see the value in maybe needing to like streamline things a little bit, and that like if you have an executive director and one that is appointed by the governor, that does like it allows for more of a kind of unified like vision for like this is where we're going to go as a state. But I think that the check is, or what in my opinion the check should be, is that the person or persons that the governor appoints to these things are qualified to do it. And the issue I have here, and I mean I don't know Governor Stitt, right? Like I could be totally wrong with what I'm about to say, but my suspicion is, so the governor has like removed himself from all of his business deal, right? He's like not involved with Gateway Mortgage. He's done the ethical thing and removed himself from all of that. But if he was gonna have a say in who was gonna be running his company in his absence, does anybody really think that if his board came to him and said, "Hey, Governor, we've got the perfect person to run Gateway Mortgage while you're the governor." It's pretty young. They studied history at such and such university, and they just really are a great visionary leader. They've never worked in banking, and don't have any experience in like commercial lending or mortgage lending, and they don't have a kind of professional or educational background in that industry. But we really just think with their vision, they're like the right choice. Mm-hmm. Does anybody think that the governor would be like, yeah, you know what, that sounds like that's a great idea. It's like it is to me, this hire, and this has been reflected in several of the hires that the governor has made. It is reflective of the idea that if you are successful as a business person, that means that you can be successful at anything. You can do anything, because running a business is the hardest, most difficult, most like, if you're an entrepreneurial person, that means that you can that you can come in and just step into this leadership role. And I don't think that that's necessarily the case. Like, I think that foster care and mental health services and senior services, like I think these things, they are incredibly complicated from a regulatory standpoint, both at the state level and at the federal level. Mm-hmm. They're complicated from a human standpoint. They're complicated from a research standpoint. Like, how many different state and federal programs tie into DHS and the work that it does every day, right? And now you've appointed somebody to lead the agency that doesn't have a background in working in any of those things.
Right. I think, I'm not saying that I think he's the best choice necessarily. I will say that in some ways, I feel like this is, in my opinion, better than some of the other appointments that the governor has made. In my assessment, because at least Mr. Brown's background is somewhat related to this. Like, if he had been running a NASCAR team and then come over, like, that would be a bit more of a red flag, a checkered flag, if you will. There's a rim shot there. I think that would be a different story, right? Like, again, if he's running an agency that deals with some of these entities, he's been running a business that deals with some of these entities, I think in my mind, there's an argument to be made that his actual duties and role might be somewhat similar to what he was doing before. Not directly translatable, and not certainly as translatable as like Commissioner Lake, who had run state agencies. But at some point, you're going to run out of people.
I mean, no, like, you're right. I mean, I guess I would say, like, if he had hired someone who was a national director for, like, I'm trying to think of, if he was hiring someone who had been the executive director of a large statewide or national agency that coordinates adoption services, or a previous CEO or CFO of a large hospital, or, somebody like an administrator from like the VA, or someone who had like, but I mean, as best I can tell, like, he owns a venture capital firm that bought several nursing homes and owns them because it looked like a good business opportunity. Like,
Well, yeah, but I
is he
think-
involved in the day-to-day management of that at all?
No, but I have a hunch based on my experience with other VCs that he has some awareness and understanding of how the business works, right? Like
He understands how you can make money at it.
I think there's more than that. Like, because the VCs I know won't invest in businesses they don't understand. They want to invest so they can be involved in the day to day. So that, and because they've got connections, not just because it's a good investment, right? Like, there's a different kind of connection. So, also, if you watch Shark Tank and think about how the sharks choose some of those things, I know it's a show, but like, I think there's a lot of truth in some of that.
I mean, and you like you may be 100% right. Like, and now I will say, like, I have strong feelings about the way the healthcare and hospital administration has gone in this country in the last 30 years. But I would say though that like most, for better or worse, most of the MBAs that run, well, first of all, usually people that are running hospitals and clinics, they're not straight MBAs, they're Masters of Healthcare Administration, and most of them have.
I'm a straight MBA.
Yes, I'm aware.
Entrepreneurship, actually.
I'm aware. But they also though have extensive experience, right? Like they've worked in the healthcare sector like their whole career.
It's kind of a left-right thing here, right? Like a Republican-Democrat thing, where I think that Democrats or people on the left are perhaps more comfortable with people who have specific expertise in the area they're given authority over, whereas folks on the right are, they have more faith in people who are men of industry.
Sure.
Right?
Right.
I think you're 100% right. And I mean, I'm not like, I've said on the show at least twice a week, like I'm a progressive, right? But I'm one, not anti-business. And I also I absolutely appreciate the value. Like, I think it is absolutely true that there are innumerable government agencies, both at the state and federal level, that could benefit from a better, more global implementation of business strategy and techniques in their day-to-day management.
Sure.
I think that is 100% true.
And that's why I got my MBA, so I can help nonprofits to have better business mindset.
I think that's true. And I think that you can take someone who, I think there are times when it is a reasonable chance to take someone whose only experience is in the private sector and put them in charge of a public sector agency if there's enough overlap. Right? Like, now, I don't think that even though there's a lot of overlap, it's a good idea to take a coal executive and put that person in charge of the EPA. Right? Like, I don't think that that's a good
there's a
fit,
counter
right?
to it.
But I think that you could absolutely take someone who has run a private sector hospital system and make them the administrator of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Like, that makes a lot of sense to me, even if they've never worked at the VA before.
Right.
I think that they would bring a lot there. It turned out to be a disaster for a number of reasons, but actually when you look at President Trump and the people that he hired in his cabinet, the person that I was actually most optimistic about was Rex Tillerson. As Secretary of State. I was like, you know what? Like, I don't know how this is going to go, but I could see a scenario under which that works really, really well. It didn't, but it could have.
Right, what's going on in the alternate universe where Rex Tillerson is still Secretary of State?
Right.
We've made peace with Russia. It's all going swimmingly.
Everything's fine.
No tariffs.
I don't know. And again, like, this is an area I was talking with a legislator this week, and they were kind of like, the governor has put all of his eggs in one basket, right? Like, it's like top 10. You gave me the power to hire and fire.
Yeah.
You gave me, but like, so in 2 years, if DHS is like cooking with gas, then I'll sit here and say like, man, Justin Brown, that was I was not a fan, but it looks like it's been a great hire. But in 2 years, if DHS is like, not, then
and that's the double-edged sword of being an agency head, right? Where like if things go well, it's probably a team effort, but if things tank, which is certainly unlikely the result of one person, you are also the fall guy for that.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
All right, well,
shall we move to our next one?
We should. We are
what's our time situation?
We're nearing the end of time. Let's give it 5 minutes here.
All right.
So our last topic we're going to discuss is Another decision by the governor that was announced this week that he is effectively ending lobbying contracts that have been held by state agencies, right?
Yes.
And so this was something that came up, I think, during the campaign even. Many state agencies contract with lobbyists to be at the Capitol as opposed to hiring like a legislative liaison or having someone that's on staff. Well, right? Or is this actually those two?
No, so this is like private lobbying firms.
Okay. So like hiring
Right.
Contract
FKG or
lobbyists.
So
something.
that in January, he issued an executive order that says agencies cannot sign new third-party lobbying contracts.
Right.
With like
like a-
private firms.
Right. Or individuals or whatever.
Right.
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 And part of his statement with this was him saying like, you should, if agencies, because the argument was, so he said like agencies should partner up. So the argument was like, well, some agencies can't afford it. So several of us will, like, we all each hire our own and do it like, rather than hiring someone in-house, they would contract with someone for like $1,000 a month or something.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, you should just all get together and use the same person then, and like aligned interests, right? So like if rather than, let's get a good example. So rather than like the health department having an in-house liaison and the professional,
And DHS having an in-house liaison.
well, I think those can afford it, but like a smaller entity like I was going to say like the LPC, like the Licensed Counselor Board, like they can't afford a lobbyist. So I don't think they do, but they could hire a contractor for, a small retainer each month, like, $300, $500 a month or $1,000 a month. And Stitt was like, no, you should just talk to the health department and have their person be your person also, like kind of.
He wants them to get together, or he even wants like smaller agencies. Like he wants the LPC board to get together with the medical board and the nursing board, and the
social worker
board and the physical therapy board, and like have one. They all put their resources together and
Which is
have one.
probably what
lobbyist.
happened, really. Like they probably all contract with the same person.
Probably.
Brian's nodding also.
That sounds right.
So I can probably name some of those lobbyists that had those contracts.
So the question that I wanted to talk about, and I'm curious what you guys think about this, and this kind of dovetails with. So there's two things that happen. So Governor Stitt is ending lobbying contracts, right? And so that's one kind of like limitation of lobbyists. However, the legislature voted down in the last week of session, voted down the recommendations from the ethics board saying that legislators, there has to be a 2-year cooling off period before legislators can register as lobbyists. And I guess the question I would put to you guys is, does any of this matter? Right?
Yes.
Like does limiting the ability of agencies to hire professional third-party lobbyists, like does that matter for government? And does the ability of state legislators to not run for office or when they've termed out immediately become a lobbyist, like does that matter?
Yeah, I think it matters a lot. The first point that ending the ability of these agencies to have their own independent lobbyist, third-party lobbyist with the legislature. I don't know. I mean, one of the things that lobbyists do, which is really valuable, I think, is explain to legislators what's going on with whatever industry or agency that they're representing. And, I'm concerned that if you put all of that on state employees who are already overworked and underpaid, by the way, that the legislature is just going to be less informed.
Andrew?
I agree. I mean, that's the hard part is that the legislators cannot be experts in everything. If they've got to have someone from state agencies to be that person to help inform them, and the agency heads have to be busy running the agency, so it's not like they can be up there all the time, right? Same reason that like a lot of nonprofits and other organizations hire contract lobbyists is because they're all doing their work. They're trying to hire someone who's an expert and has these relationships already to do it.
So I think that the reason that steps like this are being taken, like so the limiting hiring of third party lobbyists, I think that's one to save money. But the other point that they were making is that a lot of these third party lobbyists, right? They, if the medical board hires a third-party lobbyist, that lobbyist probably has dozens of other private contracts, right? And so I think one of the thoughts is that the other people that they lobby for, who are paying them lots and lots of money, they're gonna go in and they're gonna kind of sneak that in the door when they're lobbying on behalf of the public agency that they represent. So I think it's one, trying to save money on the part of the agencies by not letting them use their appropriated funds in this way, but two, trying to limit the influence of outside money and outside group on our politics. And I think that is absolutely what the ethics committee was getting at, saying that like there's conflicts of interest for legislators who immediately move into lobbying after they've termed out or lost their election and declined to run again. But I guess to phrase the question a different way, are these kinds of changes, if the legislature had adopted the ethics committee rule, they didn't, but let's say that if they had, and then these changes that the governor is making, are those the most effective way to curb the influence of big money and outside influences in our politics?
The best way? I don't know. But there's
or even a good way.
I don't know.
I think that we expect a lot of our legislators. Actually, I mean it's not an easy thing to do, and they they're not all of them wealthy people, and so that there is. I'm the problems are real though. The problems with that being part of the system are real.
So you're leading me right where I want to go, which is like, so I would actually submit that like these are fine things to do, and they're things that I think politically they look good, but at the end of the day, I don't think they make that big of a difference because, as you said, the legislature and their staff are still overworked and underpaid. If you want to limit the influence of like this kind of money and these kind of third-party influences in our politics, you need to do three things. You need to pay legislators more, like a lot more. You need to pay their staff a lot more, and you need to give them bigger budgets to hire a lot more staff. Because, like as you said, and we've talked about it before on the show, the reason that they rely on lobbyists so much, and again, disclaimer, we have many friends that are lobbyists. Lobbyists are not inherently evil people. Like there are some that do really good things. But the reason that they rely on them so much is because you may have two legislators who have one part-time legislative assistant, and like that is their staff. This is not like the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee who's got $1.5 million to hire 25 people, right? Like that's not how this works. So if we want that we get the government that we are willing to pay for, right? And if we are only willing to pay our legislators $30,000 a year, right, and let them have enough staff to have one part-time person, then you're going to have a lot of people with a lot of money from the outside knocking at their door telling them what they want to do, right? So, like, you want this to change, then we need to pony up the cash and pay for the professional legislature, for the professional government that we want, because as I have said ad nauseum, even just today, working in government is a skill. It is a skill. It is not working in government. It's not a thing that you do if you can't do anything else. Everyone that I know who works in government does it because they're passionate about public service. And most of them can make a lot more money doing other things. And they deserve better than what we give them for that work.
That's fair. I was saying, I think we had this conversation earlier this week, Scott, but I agree that we need to pay, that higher pay would change the dynamics there. I don't know that higher pay would necessarily be the solution because the cost of campaigning and running for office is still enormous in the emotional toil. And a lot of folks just don't like the ickiness of that, right? Of campaigning, of being in government, and the frustration. And I think, people like former Senator A.J. Griffin, who's a friend of the show, right? Like, she was very ready to get out of that building.
Yeah.
And became a lobbyist of sorts, I believe, and is doing well for herself. But she is someone who then and now continues to advocate for things that matter, and arguably is able to do more now because aside from her job, she has time to like dedicate to some of these boards and stuff that she serves on to really make a difference.
No, I mean, you're 100% right. Like, I'm not saying that doesn't like fix it doesn't make the problem like go away. But to me, if we're going to try and take a concrete step that moves us a measurable direction, like a measurable distance in the right direction, that's the biggest first step that we could take, right? And not only are you going to like, not only would they be able to do more, right? Like a lot of legislatures, now the ones that I think do the best job look at being elected official as a full-time job, right? They work they work 4 months while they're in session, but they spend the rest of their year learning about their district, going to conferences, learning about statewide issues, visiting districts that aren't theirs, like figuring out what they can do for the people of Oklahoma. There are some people that serve there 4 months and then they go back to a full-time job and don't think about it again until February. I would guess though that if they made $100,000 a year instead of $30,000 a year, you would have a lot more people that would want to sign up and do it as a full-time job.
If we did that, would you also make session the full year?
Maybe not. Like you might keep them in session longer, but like with more frequent recesses and breaks. But I think the part of the reason,
like Congress does.
Yeah, like I think part of the reason though is like, I mean, we had Representative West, right? Like, dude lives 4.5 hours away from his family, right? Like, so I don't know what is harder on a person like him. Is it better to be like in for 2 weeks and 2 weeks on a recess, in for 2 weeks and 2 weeks on a recess, or is it better to just like knock it out 4 months and then go home and be home for the rest of the year?
I think. I mean, there's pros and cons of both. And like Texas, as a freaking example, like they only do session every other year, right?
Yeah.
And some states do budget only 1 year and then full session the next. And
the other thing that you would have is that if you paid them a real professional wage, right? And I mean, I pulled $100,000 a year out of a hat, but like you can make up whatever number you want. You would have a lot fewer independently wealthy people, right? Because the people that are in the legislature, they're people that are either they are making a sacrifice and they're doing that intentionally because they want to serve, or they're people that don't have to worry about the money, and so they do it because they don't need the $30,000 a year. You could pay them nothing and they wouldn't care, right? Like,
right.
There's like I don't know anybody who's in the legislature for the salary, one way or the other.
No, but I mean, there are people like Cindy Munson who this is their full-time job. Like this is really what she does, and she's not independently wealthy. Right.
That's what I'm saying. I think Cindy is someone who is making a sacrifice to be in public service. I think that Cindy, with all of her experience and just being the person that she is, could work in the private sector and make a lot more money. She chooses to serve because it's what she loves to do. It's what she's passionate about.
Quintessential public servant. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of this episode. That was a good discussion, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. Brian, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. This worked out well. I like this.
Thanks for stopping by. You got free whiskey and a good conversation out of it.
That's right. You gonna come back and like recreate that whole criminal justice discussion we had beforehand?
I don't know, man. It's hard to.
We'll get into your actual field of expertise. Thanks for joining us. As a reminder, next Saturday, June 15th at 10:30 a.m., we're having Civic Saturday at the Paramount Room here on Film Row in Oklahoma City, in partnership with Mayor Holt's office, Generation Citizen, and Citizen University, which is a nationwide organization. You can picture this as a bit of like a church service, right? We're going to have some, we call them civic scripture readings. It's really just some quotes and stories from civic heroes. There's going to be a civic sermon. You can look up Eric Liu, L-I-U, on TED Talks. He's given a bunch of really great TED Talks, been viewed by tens of millions of folks. He's going to be here giving a civic sermon for us. We're going to have some poets from local poets, some musicians from local musicians. All of this crammed into an hour and a half. Should be a ton of fun. Hope to see you there. 10:30 at the Paramount. Find details on facebook.com/Let's Fix This Okay. Be sure and rate our podcast. Tell your friends. And remember that we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. We really need your support to help doing this podcast, doing all of our other stuff. After Civic Saturday, we got some really big, exciting things coming up, and we hope for you will get involved. So hit us up online, letsfixthisok.org. Scott is at SC Melson on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at AndyOKC. All of this is at Let's Fix This Okay. What are you going to say, Scott?
My Twitter feed is much less fiery than I am.
Fair enough. Have a good week, everybody.